On the night of our 5th wedding anniversary, Julian Reed knelt on one knee, fastening a new diamond necklace around my neck. "My dearest, you're my life," he whispered, kissing my earlobe, his voice as soft as melted honey. I scoffed, remembering the document I'd just seen. "Et la Ravance Psychological Destruction Plan." His handwriting was on it. Year 5, self-awareness completely stripped. Initiate final phase. "Julian." I cupped his face, gazing earnestly into his deeply affectionate eyes. "What would you do if someone destroyed the thing you love most?" His eyes didn't flicker. "I'd kill them." I nodded, pulling a knife from behind my back, and smiled as I asked, "What if it was you?" Alara Vance POV. In the 5th year of my marriage to Julian Reed, I found a top-secret psychological evaluation report in his private safe. The cover bore a bold title, Alara Vance Psychological Destruction Plan. I had only meant to find his passport to book 2 tickets to Iceland as a surprise for our 5th anniversary. The safe's password was my birthday, and it opened with a casual try. But there was no passport, only this thick stack of documents. My hands trembling, I opened the first page. Julian's familiar, sharp handwriting filled the pages, every sentence like a poisoned blade. Year 1, she trusts me completely. Her fear of abandonment has been entirely suppressed by my fabricated, unconditional affection. Year 3, she has left the orchestra. Her social circle has been wiped clean. She has nothing but me. Year 5, dependency reached 100%. Self-awareness stripped. Final phase can be initiated, complete emotional deprivation and social ruin. My mind exploded, leaving only a sharp ringing in my ears. All of New York knew Julian Reed was completely obsessed with his wife. He would drive across half the city on a freezing winter night just because I mentioned wanting a strawberry cake from the upscale bakery across town, making sure it was the first thing I saw when I woke up. If I accidentally cut my finger while practicing cello, he would tear up, taking my hand in his mouth as if the wound was in his own heart. He even bought an entire island, naming it after me, claiming it was his worry-free paradise built just for me. He would always whisper in my ear, "Darling, the outside world is too complicated. You just need to hide under my wing and be my little princess." So, I willingly gave up my position as principal cellist, cut off contact with my friends, and lived like a bird in a gilded cage. But now, these documents brutally revealed that every romance, every profound display of affection over these 5 years had been a precisely calculated psychological trap. At the end of the file, a woman's photo was clipped. It was Chloe Davis. 5 years ago, the talented cellist Chloe Davis's reputation was destroyed by a sudden bullying scandal. She ended up with permanently damaged legs in a car accident during a rainstorm. And the biggest beneficiary of that scandal was me, who took her place as principal. I had always thought it was just an accident, until I saw a sentence Julian had written on the back of the photo. She took Chloe's stage and her legs. I will take her soul. The sound of the lock turning suddenly echoed. My body stiffened. I frantically shoved the documents back into the safe and slammed the door shut. The next second, the study door opened. Julian, dressed in a custom suit, held a bouquet of rare crushed ice blue roses. He walked in against the light, the tenderness in his eyes capable of drowning anyone. "Alara, why are you sitting on the floor? The marble is cold. You'll get sick." He strode over, casually placed the flowers on the table, and effortlessly lifted me, his movements practiced and careful, as if I were a fragile, rare treasure. He lowered his head, pressing his warm lips to my forehead, his voice deep and doting. "Happy 5th anniversary, darling." I leaned against his broad, warm chest, breathing in his familiar cedar scent, feeling as if all the blood in my body had frozen. I looked into those deeply affectionate eyes. For 5 years, I had seen stars and oceans in those eyes, a unique, unconditional love. But it turned out they were just a mirror, reflecting his cold-blooded intent to kill. "Why are you trembling?" Julian frowned slightly, his large hand enveloping my icy fingers, a perfectly timed flicker of concern in his eyes. "Was the window not closed properly? I'll go heat you some milk." He placed me on the soft cashmere sofa and turned towards the kitchen. I watched his retreating back. He rolled up his shirt sleeves, his long fingers moving deftly, his profile looking so charming in the warm yellow light. This man had woven an airtight net with the most extreme tenderness. He had groomed me into a useless shell who couldn't live without him. And then he was preparing to push me off a cliff with his own hands. I bit down hard on my lip until I tasted blood, just to stop myself from screaming. I remembered when I was 18, I'd bled my finger practicing cello, and he'd cradled my hand in his, promising to protect me. I remembered on our wedding day, he swore before the priest that I was his only belief in this life. It was all fake. He never wanted to love me. He wanted to elevate me to the highest point, only to let me fall and shatter into a million pieces. Extreme pain, I realized, was silent. Alara Vance POV. I drank the milk. The sickly sweet taste slid down my throat, but it felt like swallowing broken glass, cutting my insides until they bled. The next morning, Julian said he had an important international meeting at his company. Before leaving, he pressed a lingering good morning kiss to my lips. I watched his car drive out of the villa, then turned and hailed a cab, following him. The car didn't head to the Reed Group building, but drove into New York's most secluded high-end rehabilitation center in the suburbs. I stood at the end of the long corridor, peering through the glass panel on the patient room door. Chloe sat in a wheelchair, pale but still beautiful. And Julian, who was always composed and superior in front of me, was now kneeling before Chloe's wheelchair. He wasn't wearing his usual impeccably tailored suit jacket. His tie was slightly loosened, and his eyes showed deep fatigue and unconcealed pain. "Chloe, are you feeling better today?" His voice was hoarse, with a slight tremor. Chloe didn't speak, just stared blankly out the window. Julian took her lifeless hand, pressing it to his cheek, his eyes reddening. "Soon, Chloe. Just a few more days that I've completely broken Alara Vance's will. Tomorrow is her comeback concert. I'll make her atone for all the suffering you endured, in front of the whole world. I'll ruin her reputation, make her taste the despair you went through." I stood outside the door, my nails digging deep into my palms. Blood dripped from between my fingers onto the pristine white tiles, yet I felt no pain. So, this was the real Julian. In front of me, he was a perfectly executed program, every glance, every movement, a best solution derived from psychological analysis. His love for me was flawless, yet utterly devoid of warmth. But in front of Chloe, he felt pain, fatigue, and lost control. This was the love of a living, breathing person. I remembered Julian once telling me, "Alara, you don't need to grow up around me. I'll always be your safe harbor." It turned out he wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to clip my wings, drain my blood, and turn me into a soulless puppet, only to effortlessly tear me apart at the very end. I didn't rush in to confront him, nor did I cry hysterically. Like a ghost, I turned and left the rehabilitation center. Back in the villa Julian called our love nest, I looked around. Our massive wedding photo, intimately embracing, hung on the wall. The roses he'd clipped for me that morning sat on the table. The air still carried the calming scent he'd specially blended for me. Everything here was a custom-made cage for me. My phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Julian. "Darling, this meeting is so boring. All I can think about is you. Are you ready for tomorrow's concert? Don't be nervous. I'll be in the audience with you." I stared at the loving message on screen, then suddenly chuckled. As I laughed, Tears finally streamed down my face. For tomorrow's 5th anniversary, I had secretly rehabilitated for 6 months, enduring excruciating pain in my fingers, just to pick up the cello again. I had planned to surprise him on stage, to show him that I was still the Alara Vance who could stand by his side. But it turned out he had already set the trap, waiting for me to fall into it. My fingers trembling, I typed a reply, "Okay." "Julian, since you want to see me shattered into a million pieces, then I will grant your wish and play out this final act with you." Alara Vance POV. On the night of my comeback concert, New York's Lincoln Center was packed. Backstage in the dressing room, Julian personally knelt to help me put on my diamond-studded heels. He looked up, his gaze so tender it could melt anyone. "My Alara, you'll be the most dazzling queen on stage tonight." I looked at him, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Will I?" "Of course." He stood, pressing a reverent kiss to my forehead. "Go on. I'll be watching you from the best seat." I hugged my cello, walking step by step towards the spotlighted stage. When I played the first note, the entire hall fell silent. It was Sunken Star, a piece I had once been most proud of. However, just as the music reached its climax, the giant LED screen behind the stage suddenly flickered. The beautiful starry background vanished, replaced by a maliciously edited surveillance video and audio recording. In the video, my back was visible at the top of the stairs, coldly watching Chloe fall. In the audio, a voice eerily similar to mine sneered arrogantly, "As long as your hands are crippled, the principal position will be mine." The music stopped abruptly. The entire hall erupted in an uproar. Countless gazes of shock, disdain, and anger shot like arrows towards me in the center of the stage. Oh my God, she's truly despicable. So, Chloe's scandal and accident back then were all her doing. Murder, get off the stage. Camera flashes from the media flickered wildly, and reporters swarmed forward like sharks smelling blood. I didn't move, just quietly held my cello, my gaze cutting through the chaotic crowd, landing precisely on Julian in the VIP box. He stood in the shadows, his gentle mask completely torn away, replaced by chilling indifference and malicious pleasure. He looked at me as if I were a piece of trash finally crushed. Under the escort of security, Julian slowly descended the stairs and came to the front of the stage. Reporters immediately thrust microphones at him. "Mr. Reed, were you aware of your wife's actions?" Julian stopped, his gaze coldly fixed on me on stage. He took the microphone, his voice deep and pained. "I apologize to everyone. For these 5 years, I was blinded by her hypocritical mask. Only today have I uncovered the truth of what happened." He paused, every word he uttered like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. "Alara Vance, you disgust me." That single sentence, amplified by the microphone, echoed through every corner of the theater. The man who once held me in the palm of his hand, who would ache if I even frowned, was now personally pushing me into an abyss of destruction. I stood on stage, looking at his seemingly righteous face, and suddenly laughed. I didn't argue, didn't struggle, because I knew all this was evidence he had meticulously fabricated. He had spent 5 years setting this trap, and he would never leave me any room to turn the tables. I just stared fixedly at Julian, mouthing a phrase only we both understood. "Julian Reed, as you wish." Alara Vance POV. I don't know how I got back to the villa. The internet was flooded with insults. I was branded a vicious woman and a murderer, my former honors trampled into the mud. The villa was dark, silent. Julian sat on the leather sofa in the living room, a lit cigarette clutched between his fingers. The crimson glow flickered in the darkness. He never used to smoke in front of me because I'd said I couldn't stand the smell. But now, the entire living room reeked of choking tobacco. "Why?" I stood in the doorway, my voice so hoarse it didn't sound like my own. Julian stubbed out the cigarette and slowly stood up. He walked step by step towards me, looking down at me. His eyes held none of their former tenderness, only bone-chilling coldness. "Why?" He sneered, then suddenly reached out and clamped my chin, his grip so strong it felt like my bones would shatter. "5 years ago, Chloe's reputation was ruined because of you. Her legs were crippled, and she could never play cello again. You ask me why?" "I didn't do that," I said calmly, looking at him. "It was an accident." "Shut up." Julian's eyes were bloodshot. He roughly pinned me against the wall. "Even now you dare to argue. If you hadn't bribed the judges, if you hadn't forced her, how would she have run out in the rain?" He leaned close to my ear, his voice laced with venom. "Alara Vance, do you know how disgusting I found it, looking at your face every day for these 5 years?" I didn't struggle, letting him hold me. I looked at his familiar yet strange face and softly asked, "So, the good morning kisses, the hot milk every night, the vows under the northern lights, the roses on the island were all fake. All of it was for today." Julian curled his lips cruelly. "I hired the top psychologist to analyze your every weakness. I knew you feared abandonment most, yearned most to be unequivocally chosen. So, I gave you the most perfect love, made you utterly fall for me, made you abandon your career, made you have nothing but me. Only by lifting you to the highest point will the fall be painful enough." He released me, watching me slide down the wall to the floor, a flash of vengeful pleasure in his eyes. "Alara Vance, this is just the beginning." I sat on the cold floor, looking up at him. I didn't break down crying, nor did I kneel and beg. I just stared at him, the light in my eyes extinguishing little by little, finally becoming a desolate wasteland. "Congratulations, Julian Reed." I pulled at my dry lips. "You won." I was calm. My gaze now was like looking at a stranger. "Don't pretend to be indifferent." Julian dropped a cold remark. "From tomorrow, Chloe will move in. You owe her, and you'll spend the rest of your life paying her back." With that, he turned and went upstairs without another glance. I sat alone in the darkness, listening to the wind outside the window. My heart was dead. Even the pain had dulled. "Julian, do you think you destroyed my reputation and my pride?" "No. What you destroyed was a woman's unwavering, even self-sacrificing, genuine love for you." Alara Vance POV. The next day, Chloe moved into the villa. Julian gave her the master bedroom, changing the bedding to Chloe's favorite pure white. I was relegated to the cold, damp guest room on the first floor. I was like a transparent ghost, forced to watch Julian's extreme devotion to another woman in this love nest that once belonged to me. At lunch, Julian pushed Chloe into the dining room. He skillfully cut her steak into small, precisely 1.5 centimeter pieces, the size I used to prefer. He tested the soup's temperature with his wrist, and only after confirming it wasn't too hot, carefully spoon-fed it to Chloe. "Chloe, careful, it's hot." His voice was so gentle it could drip with sweetness. I stood in the corner, quietly watching the scene. It turned out that what I thought was exclusive devotion, those details I drowned in, were merely a program he could copy and paste onto anyone at any time. My profound love, from beginning to end, had been a joke. Chloe ate a few bites, then suddenly turned her head, looking at me in the corner, a hint of malice playing on her lips. "Julian, I'd like to hear some cello," Chloe said softly. "I used to play for you, but now my hands are useless. Could Miss Vance play for me?" Julian's movements froze. He turned to look at me, his eyes cold. "Go get the cello." I stood still. I haven't played in a long time. "I told you to get the cello." Julian's voice suddenly rose. "You owe Chloe, and you'll never be able to repay it. You're not even willing to play for her." I looked at the disgust in his eyes and suddenly felt incredibly weary. I no longer resisted, turning to the storage room to get the cello. It was an heirloom from my mother, a treasure I once valued more than my life. I sat in the center of the living room, and in front of Julian and Chloe, I drew the bow across the strings. Because I hadn't practiced intensely for so long, coupled with the old injuries from my secret rehabilitation for his surprise, my fingers started to bleed in less than 10 minutes. Blood flowed from my fingertips, staining the strings and dripping onto the expensive carpet. Every finger linked to my heart. An agonizing pain shot through me, yet I didn't even frown. I mechanically played the cello, my eyes empty, staring straight ahead. Before, if I even got a small paper cut, he would be so distressed he wouldn't sleep all night. But now, though he clenched his fists, he averted his gaze. Enough! Julian suddenly interrupted me impatiently. That sounds terrible. Do you want Chloe to have nightmares? Get back to your room. I stopped playing. I silently wiped the blood from the strings, hugged the cello, and limped back to the cold guest room. As I closed the door, I heard Chloe's delicate voice from the living room. Julian, don't be angry, Miss Vance didn't mean to. I leaned against the back of the door, slowly sliding down. I looked at my bloodied hands and suddenly laughed. These hands, which had once cooked countless delicious meals for him, which had sketched countless portraits of him, now could only be used to satisfy his hatred. A Lara Vance POV. A few days later, Chloe accidentally knocked over my cello in the living room. With a dull thud, that precious antique, a memento of my mother, broke its neck and was completely ruined. Julian rushed out from his study at the sound, seeing Chloe startled in her wheelchair, while I stood quietly amidst a pile of fragments. What happened? Julian strode over, shielding Chloe behind him. Chloe's eyes were red, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I just wanted to look at the cello. I couldn't control my wheelchair, and I accidentally bumped it. Miss Vance, please don't blame me. Julian looked at me coldly. He probably expected to see me become hysterical and enraged. After all, he knew how important that cello was to me. It was my last boundary. But I didn't. I didn't scream, didn't question, didn't even shed a single tear. I just calmly knelt down, picking up the broken wooden pieces one by one. Then I walked to the fireplace and threw them all into the burning flames. The flames instantly consumed the pieces, crackling loudly. It's just a broken cello, Julian said stiffly. It's good to burn that scrap wood. Tomorrow, I'll have someone buy you 100 better ones. I watched the dancing flames, my voice as light as a breeze. No need. I won't be playing cello anymore. My tone was too calm, as if I were a body that had already lost its soul. Julian suddenly rushed over, grabbing my wrist, his eyes so fierce they looked like they wanted to devour me. Who are you putting on this lifeless act for? Do you think pretending to be pathetic will make me let you go? I'm telling you, you haven't paid off your debt to Chloe. Yeah, you'll never leave me in this lifetime. I slowly pulled my hand free from his grasp. I looked at Julian, my eyes devoid of hate or love, only endless emptiness. Okay, I said softly. Julian seemed enraged by my answer. To provoke a reaction from me, Julian began to escalate his torment. He cut off the funding to the orchestra of my most respected teacher, driving it to the brink of bankruptcy. He used this as leverage, forcing me to serve Chloe like a maid every day. I did everything he asked. I silently endured it all, even when Chloe deliberately splashed hot soup onto the back of my hand. I would just quietly clean it up, then turn and walk away. The more compliant I became, the more agitated Julian grew. He was like a madman flailing his fists in an abyss, desperately trying to grasp something, only to find he held nothing but ashes. What he didn't know was that my heart had completely died, right there in the burning ashes of that cello. New York's late autumn brought a rare downpour. Fierce winds whipped the rain against the villa's glass windows. Late at night, my phone suddenly vibrated wildly. It was the hospital calling. My teacher, the old man who was the only one willing to believe in me and treated me like his own child after the scandal, had suffered a sudden heart attack and was in critical condition. My face instantly turned ashen. I didn't even have time to put on a coat, stumbling towards the front door. But the door was locked. The password had been changed. Even my fingerprint access was disabled. I frantically pounded on the door, then turned and rushed upstairs to the master bedroom. Julian, open the door. Please open the door. The master bedroom door opened. Julian stood in the doorway in his pajamas, his brow furrowed. What's wrong with you, raving like this so late? Chloe is afraid of thunder. She just managed to fall asleep. My teacher is in critical condition. The hospital wants me to see him one last time. My voice trembled with extreme fear. Julian, I beg you, open the door. Let me go see him. Julian looked at my paper white face, a flicker of remorse in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold hardness. Isn't this just the punishment you deserve? He said coldly. When Chloe had her accident, her teacher also fell ill from the shock. You're just tasting the pain she went through back then. I didn't do it. I suddenly let out a piercing scream, my knees buckling. I fell heavily onto the cold marble floor. The once proud to the bone me, the me who stood tall even when everyone blamed me, was now kneeling at his feet like a dog. Julian, I'll give you my life. I'll give you everything, please. Let me see him one last time. I pleaded desperately, trying to win his concession. Julian frantically pulled a remote from his pocket and pressed the unlock button. I scrambled out of the villa, rushing into the pouring rain. But it was too late. When I arrived at the hospital, soaked and bloodied, the emergency room light was already off. The doctor regretfully shook his head at me. I stood in the morgue, looking at the face covered by a white sheet on the gurney, surrounded by a deathly silence. I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell. Extreme sorrow and despair reached their breaking point at this moment, then completely dissolved into nothingness. I reached out and gently touched my teacher's face through the white sheet. At that moment, the last string connecting me to this world finally snapped. My love for Julian, my insistence on the truth, my hopes for the future, all died cleanly on that rainy night.